Good evening, Madam Chair. You are all set and ready to go.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the West Hartford Finance and Administration Committee for Monday, January 5th, 2026. And my name is Deb Poland. I'm the chair of this committee. We also have with us tonight committee members Councillor Ben Winograd and Councillor John Lyons, as well as all of the other members of our town council, Mayor Sherry Cantor, councilors Tiffany McGinnis, Lisa Lazarus, Barry Walters, Jason Wang, Gail Harris. Did I catch everybody? And we have our town manager, Rick Ledwith, and we have Todd Jumay, Dallas Dodge, and Gina Verano, and Gerida Reinheimer. So thank you everybody for joining us. We have several items to discuss tonight, and there will be also some executive sessions. So try to stick with us as we work through a quite lengthy and complicated agenda. So we'll start right off with item 2A, which is an ordinance regulating short-term rentals. And I'm going to turn this over to our Corporation Counsel, Dallas Dodge, to tee this up for us and just give us a little intro to this topic.
Sure. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Madam Chair, as the council is aware, the town has long prohibited transient uses of residential property, commonly what we would call short-term rentals. However, with the emergence of online platforms such as Airbnb and VRBO, this type of use has become increasingly prevalent in the town. In some cases, these platforms are used by residents who primarily occupy their homes but choose to rent them for short periods while away. But I think in the vast majority of cases, they are used in a more commercial manner by individuals or entities that own residential properties specifically for short-term rental purposes. Recently, Madam Chair, a business that owns a home in the RM3 district challenged the town's interpretation of the zoning ordinance, asserting that short-term rentals through platforms like Airbnb and VRBO are permitted uses in that district. The Superior Court agreed with the plaintiff, and the town has appealed that decision to the appellate court. I want to be very clear, Madam Chair, that the town believes that we strongly believe that the town's longstanding interpretation, which is that this use is not permitted, is correct. Nevertheless, with any litigation, there is, of course, the risk of an adverse appellate decision. In light of that risk, we believed it was prudent to take the proactive approach of recommending the ordinance that is before you now, which would expressly regulate short-term rentals. Madam Chair, in effect, the ordinance establishes a licensing framework for the operation of short-term rentals and limits the issuance of licenses to properties located in certain zoning districts, which would include the RM3 district, which is the area in which we are currently dealing with the appeal that I just discussed. Madam Chair, I will refer to the town planner, who I believe is on the call, to explain the rationale for the additional districts that are proposed for eligibility. I would also note that state statute expressly authorizes municipalities to license short-term rentals. This was done about 2 years ago when this was a very big topic at the General Assembly, and they were struggling with how to tax short-term rentals, whether it should be taxed similar to a hotel or motel with a room occupancy tax. At the same time that they created a special state tax for Airbnb purposes, they also allowed municipalities to license those facilities to the extent that they are used or operated in town. So, Madam Chairwoman, the ordinance defines a short-term rental as any occupancy of a residential property for consideration, or in other words, for payment, for a period of 1 month or less. Anyone wishing to engage in this activity would be required to obtain a license from the town planner, and licenses could be issued only for properties that are located in certain zoning districts, which again, I will let the town planner better describe why we chose certain zoning districts to allow these licenses to be issued in. Madam Chair, the license process is fairly straightforward. A single license may cover several properties. However, we are proposing a licensing fee of $100 per property, which must be paid at the time of the application and again upon renewal. Applicants would be required to provide proof of ownership, contact information for the individual or the entity that is managing the property, an affidavit confirming that they are not delinquent in any financial obligations owed to the town, and an affidavit indicating whether the property is primarily owner occupied. While the owner occupancy, while primary owner occupancy is not a prerequisite for licensure, the reason we're asking for it from applicants is that the information may be relevant to the tax assessor in determining whether the property should be assessed at true and actual value, like most residential properties are, or as a commercial income producing property. Madam Chair, the licenses would be personal to the licensee, and this point is important, meaning that they are not transferable and they do not run with the land. In other words, if a licensed property were sold to a new owner and the new owner wished to also operate the property as an Airbnb, then that new owner would be required to apply for their own license in order to do so. So nobody would be grandfathered in simply because someone had obtained a license for the property previously. Madam Chair, the ordinance imposes several conditions on the licensees. That includes that they remain current on all property taxes and other financial obligations to the town, that there be no municipal liens filed on the property, and that both the licensee and the guests comply with all applicable state, federal, and local laws. And the properties would be held to a heightened standard for noise violations beyond what is otherwise provided in the health code. That provision, Madam Chair, is similar to something that we included in our entertainment ordinance. Usually under the health code for decibel violations, there's an actual decibel reading that you can't exceed in town. And I think for this type of use, given the risk that some of these might become party houses or that type of stuff, we want to create sort of a heightened standard for noise violations where it would be a more subjective standard. And the question would be whether there was noise that was emanating from the property was disturbing people nearby or was unreasonable. Madam Chair, in the event of a violation, the town planner has a few options. He may issue an abatement plan to bring the license into compliance, but depending on the nature, the severity, and the curability of the violation, the license may also be revoked. Any person who is aggrieved by a revocation would have the right to appeal to the District of Community Planning to review the town planner's decision. With that, Madam Mayor, or Madam Chairwoman, sorry, force of habit, I will turn it over to the town planner to discuss the proposed zoning districts that were selected. I'm, of course, happy myself to answer any additional questions that the committee may have. At the conclusion of the public discussion, and I think it's entirely appropriate to have a policy level discussion here about the ordinance, but we would like to update you on strategy and negotiation with regard to the pending litigation, how adoption of this ordinance might play into that. And so I would ask anybody who has any questions on the pending litigation or anything related to enforcement of the existing ordinance, please reserve those questions for the executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee and council. So the zoning districts that were selected to be included as a permitted use were our more intense multifamily residential districts, those being the RM4, RM3, RM2, RM1, and then the RO, RMMS, RCO, and RMO. So these are all residential zones that by and large are located in and around our commercial corridors or within major arterial roadways such as Farmington Avenue and Park Road. They naturally are a more intense zone with more permissive zoning and provide for transitional land use from our commercial core into our adjoining single-family residential districts. And that's essentially why they were selected.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a draft ordinance before us, and I know it's kind of a lot for all of us to take in at one time, but I do want to open up to committee members first for questions. Mr. Winograd first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Yeah, I mean, to the chair's point, we haven't had a whole lot of time to review this. So I have some preliminary thoughts about issues in terms of, everything from the amount of the fee, to locations, to, limitations, perhaps by, to avoid overburdening particular neighborhoods with the approvals. But I'm not sure it makes sense to go into everything sort of right here. And I was wondering what procedurally, what we're looking for in terms of bringing this to full council, and when we'll sort of have an opportunity for sort of more thoughtful discussion.
Yes, excellent question. So I think I will turn that back over to Mr. Dodge. I think the goal tonight is for us to get this through this committee, put it on the council agenda for next week, and then what happens after that? What's the goal for after that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, this is obviously a little bit of a quicker process than we normally follow. And I think I'd sent the council an email about, the irregularity actually of this appearing in front of this committee. Normally this would go to CPED, but it was a crime of opportunity because we had this committee meeting tonight. The appeal, we got the decision in November on the Superior Court decision, and we immediately retained appellate counsel to seek certification from the appellate court to allow us to take the appeal. I don't want to go too far into the appellate strategy, but we're in a situation right now where the appellant has an opportunity to object to our request for certification, and after that, the appellate court will have some time, although it's not a defined period, to decide whether the appeal is going to go, whether it's going to take the appeal or not. So in terms of the timing of it, our goal, our hope, and again, we can talk about this in a lot more detail in executive session, would be that adopting this ordinance would effectively moot the current appeal that is pending before the town and negate the expense to the town of continuing to litigate that matter. So that's why we're moving a little bit more quickly than normal. Obviously, the timing of the decision and then the holidays hitting made it a little bit difficult to get something drafted for council review, but we did want to get in front of committee before going to the town council. Depending on how tonight goes, I think our goal was to get it onto the next council agenda. But if the consensus is that it needs a little bit more time for review and comment, we could potentially wait until the next council meeting after that, depending on what the consensus is. And we can talk about the timing of that too a little bit more in executive session.
Thank you. So back over to you, Mr. Winograd.
Thank you. I mean, I think, again, I feel like I should be transparent about, raising a few issues I have sort of preliminarily, including the sort of minor point that the amount of the fee of the license seems low to me, but more substantively, the both limits on the number of licenses, and I'm not sure about the rationale for the limiting it to particular zones. I mean, we sort of know we have lots of existing illegal at this point ones in town that I think tend to be in other zones, and so, and I do worry about sort of the burdening arterials with sort of lots of things, and there's sort of issues about whether or not we should be putting higher uses only where there are currently higher uses, or whether with enough control this might be more appropriate in other areas, and certainly where the existing Airbnbs are, I think are in single family zones right now. So I'd really be sort of more curious about the current situation before we start trying to limit it, and even whether it would be effective to try to limit at this point, given the current uses.
Yeah, and I think, Ben, I'll let the planner talk a little bit more about where we think we're seeing these uses right now. Obviously, they're unregulated, and so, typically we don't become aware of them unless there's a neighbor complaint or something like that. We did toy with the idea of potentially just limiting the number of licenses, similar to what we did for the cannabis licenses. But I think that's, actually an example where I think that can be somewhat difficult limiting them because it's then sort of first come, first serve in terms of anybody obtaining one of these licenses. And the other problem is that we don't really have any actual data on how many properties are actually being used for this purpose right now. And so if we were to cap the number of licenses, I think there'd be complicated questions in terms of the number of properties that might, depending on how the litigation goes, be grandfathered in, and how many people would actually be applying for the licenses. So I think without having that data, because it is unregulated right now, and there's really, there's so many different sites and stuff that you can um, rent these on, and some of them might not even be done on sites. They might be, or what we think of as a traditional short-term rental platform like Airbnb. They might be done on Craigslist or done the old-fashioned way through a newspaper. That's why we sort of turned away from the idea of capping, allowing it broadly throughout town and then capping the number of licenses because of the difficulty in determining what an appropriate number of licenses would be. So it seemed to make more sense to identify zones where, and I think the selection of the zones isn't just due to the heightened use in those neighborhoods. As the town planner mentioned too, it also has to do with the proximity to the commercial zones. Typically somebody who's renting an Airbnb, maybe you're looking for a more bucolic setting up on the mountain, but I think in most instances, it's families visiting relatives or maybe business executives, that type of thing, who probably want proximity to commercial districts and walkable, and may not have a car of their own, and so want walkable a walkable lifestyle while they're using their short-term use.
Through you, Madam Chair. I've got some follow-ups, but I think they actually probably more appropriately go into the executive session. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Lyons, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. It's the new kid on the block, so I'm going to call these rookie questions. But what if I always struggle when there's a have and have not situation in town. And I know every single resident has different reasons for different issues, why they want to approach different issues. So why not make this blanket and include R10 and other residential only? I don't sense the demand is so high, but I also am concerned both with equity from a residential standpoint and also thinking about town staff and the workload and enforcement that the town has to go through. I also want to try to alleviate that, make life a little easier on town staff having to administrate these things. Why not do them? I don't think nothing's on the table because we can kind of turn a blind eye to this, it sounds like, for a while. But I mean, I think of, I'll throw a road out, Ellsworth, no names mentioned, which I think is R10. It's certainly not one of the ones Mr. Dumais listed. Why not look at just a blanket, and maybe it needs to be tweaked a lot, but a blanket ordinance?
I'll let Todd weigh on this, but I think first on the equity question, and again, these are questions that we looked at a staff level about, do we limit it to certain zones or do we simply allow people to apply for licenses town-wide? On the equity question, there's a concern. Airbnb has evolved where I think initially, genuinely was primarily owner-occupied properties where people were renting them on a short-term basis for convenience. If they went on vacation, it was a way to make some extra income from renting out your house. The majority of Airbnb properties are now effectively commercial. And so the concern with opening it up town-wide is that you could see an erosion of housing stock that's available for long-term residencies. In other words, without a license cap and then with it available in every residential zone, there would be a risk that you would have commercial entities come in and buy up single-family residential homes in order to use those for commercial use. But Todd, I didn't know if there was anything else that you want to add to that.
No, Dallas, I think through you, Madam Chair, I think that's correct. I mean, New York has been grappling with this issue on a much broader scale, and the impact of short-term rentals on housing supply that's heavily constrained there. Um, if by way of example, most of our enforcement actions have come vis-a-vis complaints from neighbors, and they have existed in single-family homes, and we have successfully pursued a number of enforcement actions historically, as Corporation Counsel Dodge mentioned. These are not a permitted use. And most of the time we achieve compliance with the property owner. More recently, we're starting to see these as commercial enterprises, and that's why some of the zones that were selected. One of the challenges we do have, if you pull up Airbnb, for example, you can't actually determine where those listings are located. They shield the actual address unless you go in for an actual booking and go through to book the property and contact the owner. So the best we can do is look at the map and match if there's a picture of the outside of the unit with a listing. I just randomly plugged in just now random dates in February, and there was 26 listings in Greater West Hartford. 20 of which are listed as apartment and appear to be in a multifamily zone based on the images and or their locations. It's not an exact science, and that's part of the challenge with picking these out through Airbnb without that data.
All right, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dumaine, Mr. Dodge. I guess I'll close by saying I agree with Councilor Winograd's, if I understood you correctly, sir, that I think the fee should be, obviously an annual fee, but certainly significantly higher, because I think that could also help mitigate problems, in terms of driving the cost up a little bit and keeping the renters, keeping them honest, I guess, best way to put it. I don't want to say anything and get myself in trouble. So thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
And Madam Chair, if I could just weigh in on the fee, setting that is a difficult issue. And the reason is that towns cannot use licensing fees to be revenue generators. In other words, we can't effectively create a de facto Airbnb tax by doing this. And so the fee that we charge for a permit needs to be rationally related to the cost of the town of administering the license and then enforcing the license. And so, how did we arrive at $100? It's somewhat arbitrary, but it seemed like a reasonable amount to cover our costs of the town planner's office's time in administering each license, and then any enforcement that might go along with that. It could perhaps go a little bit higher, but we wouldn't be able to charge an exorbitant rate where we would turn this into a revenue generator for the licensing fees. I would just put a bug in everybody's ear, especially in the finance committee, that I think this would probably be one of the higher licensing fees that we have in town. Todd can check me on this, but I think typically our licensing and permit fees are, like a de minimis amount, like $5 or $10 or something like that. And as sort of a wholesale matter across the board, I think the cost of some of our fees probably are due to be revisited at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. And that is a state law that prohibits us from utilizing a license fee as a revenue generator.
Right.
Those tricky state laws.
That's
Thank
a
you, Madam
very
Chair.
important clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lyons. Other members have questions? Mr. Walters.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So rather than looking at specific zoning districts, would it make any sense to also, or instead of, look at dividing the town into districts or regions? Perhaps that sounds better. Regions, whereas only so many per region of town, or as a percentage of units located within that region. I know that other municipalities set a percentage, no more than 5% of total units can be in a certain neighborhood or certain district can be utilized for short-term rentals. Is that an option for us to look at, or is it harder to enforce?
Madam Chair, from a legal perspective, it could certainly be drafted. I would defer to the town planner on any concerns there might be with enforcement or kind of determining on a. I think there's an administrative burden to that in terms of determining what is the percentage. That might be, there's questions similar to actually what we deal with 830G in terms of what are you using as your denominator, would be the last census numbers, that type of thing. But I would defer to the town planner in terms of how that might be enforced and the difficulty of creating like overlaying districts.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. And Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Walters, I think the concept of a cap or a license based on the housing stock number, that is certainly something that could be looked at. I think the challenge would be creating new districts to divide the town into. Since our existing districts are zoning districts, those would be potentially the easiest to regulate. Once we start dividing the town, it would be more challenging to then divide into districts with the appropriate number of housing units or types per district, and we probably want to do those in some fashion to have an equitable distribution of housing types and units, and whatever licenses or percentage set aside in each district would be eligible for a potential short-term rental. I think it's a more challenging approach to doing it, but it's something certainly we could look at doing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just something that I know is done. I just didn't know how easily it could be implemented here. One other question through you, Madam Chair, is just as far as I know that there was mention of management and ownership. Is there a way that we can, mandate that there's local management? I'd hate for, a situation to be where you had somebody purchasing properties here, but they don't live here. They live in Florida or wherever, and they're managing from afar. Or I would just think that we would want to have something in there that says there has to be some kind of local management in place. Yeah.
I think that probably is directed to me, Madam Chair. I think you probably could include a requirement that there be somebody local who manages the property. In terms of restricting the availability of the licenses to local owners, I think you would probably run into constitutional problems with privileges and immunities and that type of stuff. So we could look at whether there needs to be a designated person who lives within such distance of the property who's responsible for managing it. But I've never looked at the question, but going back to my first year law school constitutional law class, my guess is that we probably couldn't restrict the licenses based on where somebody lives.
And through you, Madam Chair, I wasn't talking to that. I was merely talking just the management piece, that there be local. And if it's owner managed, then great. But I think it's important that we have somebody who's within close distance to resolve an issue that may exist. And when I say issue, I'm not talking necessarily about just a sound ordinance violation. What if there's something more serious, and we probably should have somebody who's local that can be in charge, so to speak.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we could look at whether we could incorporate that into the license requirement that you provide local management contact. there could be a requirement in that the contact be somebody who resides within a certain distance of the or maybe does business within a certain distance of the property.
Thank you. You all set, Councilor Walters?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to Councilor Wang next.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for all that information, everybody. So I'm not sure if I understand how we arrived at this proposal to license as opposed to simply disallowing short-term rentals. Everyone has alluded to it throughout this conversation that we have a housing supply problem. Probably like many of you, I took a little peek on Airbnb, and some of these units are renting for $500 a night. And of course, we know that other cities have run into problems where Airbnb becomes so profitable that it starts to really displace residents. Why should we license Airbnbs in our town as opposed to ban them?
Madam Chair, I'll talk briefly from a legal perspective about why, given our current posture, a license makes sense. And it's probably appropriate for a more fulsome discussion of this in executive session. One issue would be that if we were to lose on appeal at the appellate court, anybody who was currently operating an Airbnb would be grandfathered in under the previous ordinance as a non-conforming use. Licenses are regulatory, they are not zoning. And so the grandfathering and the concept of a non-conforming use doesn't apply to the issuance of a license. So to the extent we face a risk of on litigation of this becoming an allowed prior non-conforming use if we were to ban it, the license gives us an ability to regulate those potential non-conforming uses. In terms of a policy perspective, I would defer to other members of the committee or to the town planner in terms of the wisdom of simply banning the activity altogether.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Attorney Dodge, so if we banned it, the 24 or so current non-conforming uses could potentially stay, and we'd be stuck with, a couple dozen non-conforming uses, but that would ban it into the future. To me, maybe this is best for executive session, but so maybe I'll just kind of hold off. But I'm not convinced we need to license them.
Yeah.
I'm worried that it's so profitable that it's going to displace residents.
I agree, Madam Chair. It probably is more appropriate for executive session. The one thing I know too, though, is that in terms of the current, the dozen or so uses, those are the dozen or so uses right now. There's probably people who have actively marketed their property previously, and again, this is probably more of an appropriate discussion for executive session, the risk of prior non-conforming uses.
Okay, thank you. I'll save it for the executive session.
Thank you. And I'll just add, Councilor Wayne, that any town council member always has the option to vote no on something that's before us, or yes on something that's before us. So, but good question. Do others have questions about this proposal? Councilor Harris?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to know from either the town planner or from our corporate counsel here, do we have any idea how many towns in Connecticut do allow Airbnb? Are we sort of in the minority, or are we kind of in the majority? I'm just curious if we have that kind of information.
That's probably a better question for Todd. One thing that I'll say, similar to West Hartford, is what a lot of towns are confronting is they may currently think that their ordinances prohibit Airbnb. We certainly do. But the problem is a lot of our zoning ordinances were obviously written far before Airbnb or VRBO were a thing. And so there's a lot of ordinances that use older language and stuff that, upon challenge might not operate the way that you might think it does with Airbnb. But in terms of like explicit prohibitions or licensing schemes, I don't know if Todd has information on that.
Madam Chair, through you to Councillor Harris, I don't have an exact number, but there are still a significant number of communities that, according to their own regulations, do not permit them through zoning. There are a handful of communities that have taken an approach to permit zoning allowance of short-term rentals. And then there are also a handful of communities that have approached it with the license option. This has been more acutely a persistent issue in quote unquote beach or tourist communities along the shoreline. They were kind of the first ones to more acutely see this problem because of the turnover of vacation properties. But since the advent of Airbnb, it started to spread all over the state. It's something we could certainly look into and get a better number for total communities that approach it, either ban it outright or allow it in zoning or through a license process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other counselors have questions?
I do, Madam
Mr.
Chair.
McGinnis?
My question is about, does the state right now recognize Airbnbs the same as like a hotel? Like, are they charged if a town allows them? Obviously, we don't actually, regulate them right now, but do they get charged like the occupancy tax that you're charged if you stay at the Delamar? If it's regulated, if we know it's happening, obviously.
Through you, Madam Chair, there's a specific state statute that governs the taxation of short-term rentals and residential properties. It is separate from the room occupancy tax for hotels and that sort of thing. I am embarrassed to say I don't know what the tax rate is, but there is a separate, effectively sales tax that's applied to Airbnb statewide, and that only applies to short-term rentals. So anything a month or less, anything that was a month or longer is not taxed in that way. That would be taxed as sort of pass-through income to the property owner.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the state keeps all of that tax. Do we know that?
To the extent people are reporting it to DRS, I'm sure they do.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So just to clarify, and I think this is where Ms. McGinnis was going, none of the money from the occupancy tax goes to the municipality in which the hotel, or in this case, an Airbnb, is located, correct, Mr. Dodge?
It's a good question. I believe the answer is no, but I'm not 100% certain. But I don't believe that the town gets any of the revenue similar to like cannabis or that type of thing.
Gotcha. Mr. Walters?
I just did a quick look, and of course it could be incorrect, and sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Short-term rentals are subject to statewide 15% room occupancy tax and the 6.35 sales and use tax for a total of 21.35, according to this information I just quickly logged
Thank you.
into. So.
Any other questions? Before we go back to you, Mr. Lyons, I just want to make sure that Mayor Cantor or Councillor Lazarus, do you have any questions?
I
Okay.
don't.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lyons, back to you.
This is actually not why I asked to speak again, but Councillor McGinnis and Councillor Walters put this in my head. We do have I believe we have a local restaurant tax that benefits the town. Am I correct or incorrect on that? No, we don't. I'm getting head shakes. I'm so sorry. Okay.
We,
All right.
we can, that's off topic. We'll talk about that another time.
Okay. Well, no. Okay. Just okay. Understood. Thank you. I guess I'm going to hold off anything else until after executive session. When we come back from executive session, do we conclude on this topic, or are we concluding now?
We are hoping to conclude now, move into executive session, come back and go on to the next item on our agenda. But we
Okay,
will have
so-
opportunity for additional discussion on this proposal.
Yeah, in terms of the ordinance, I'd be very nervous voting on it now or this evening. Hopefully, I'm echoing other people's thoughts that I think we should have some more time to learn. And I know there is urgency. I respect that, but I also think there's a lot of learning and certainly from my perspective on this discussion to happen. So thank you, Madam Chair. Oops.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Anyone else? Okay, so we are going to move into executive session pursuant to section 1-206B to discuss strategy and negotiations concerning pending litigation, to wit, Instant Property Solutions LLC versus Town of West Hartford Zoning Board of Appeals, docket number HHD CV 246184621. For those of you on the call who are joining us in executive session, please remember to get out of this meeting by exiting, hitting both buttons that are needed to exit, and then join us in executive session. We'll see you over there. Madam Mayor, I think you beat everybody in. Well done.
I did because I was on my phone and then I switched to my computer. I cheated.
Do I have to say anything special to get us out of executive session or just we're out? Yeah. Okay. Let's give John a chance to join us. Okay, welcome back. We are back in the regular meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. And just for the public's knowledge, we do not need to take any action on the ordinance regulating short-term rentals. We are moving on to the next business item, which is an ordinance concerning site plan approval of affordable housing developments. And I will turn this one, oh, we don't have Dallas yet. Hang on tight. Everyone wait just one moment.
He's here.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'm going to turn this one back over to Corporation Counsel Dodge to give us a brief introduction to this issue as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this ordinance is before the Finance and Administration Committee because it affects the administration of town offices, specifically which town office has authority to issue specific approvals. And specifically whether land site plan approval should, in limited circumstances, remain with the town council rather than be delegated to the town planner. Madam Chair, I'll briefly summarize the ordinance for the benefit of the public. After that, I would recommend, however, that the committee immediately enter executive session to discuss a privileged attorney-client memorandum from my office that addresses certain of the legal considerations involved in this ordinance in greater detail. Madam Chair, the ordinance was prompted by a relatively unique situation recently confronting the town. As the town council is aware, in 2024, Vessel Technologies submitted an application for an affordable housing development at 29 Highland Street. That application included a request for a zone change from residential institutional to multifamily, as well as a special development district overlay. That approach, Madam Chair, was very consistent with how any developer would have proceeded with a similar project at that site. However, Vessel also asserted that its proposal qualified as an affordable housing land use or qualified under the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Procedure, which is Section 830G of the General Statutes. And as a result, Madam Chair, had the council denied that application, the burden would have shifted to the town rather than the applicant to prove that public health, safety, and other legitimate interests outweighed the need for affordable housing. Following concerns raised during the public hearing process, Madam Chair, Vessel voluntarily withdrew its zone change and SDD applications. Vessel has now returned with a site plan application for the same property. This is different than the process that they pursued previously. Site plan approval is generally understood to be an administrative review to confirm compliance with zoning regulations, such as layout, access, parking, drainage, and landscaping, without the exercise of policy discretion. Under state law, Madam Chair, site plan authority is vested in the zoning commission of each town. However, or rather under our town charter, that is the town council. State law also permits, however, municipalities to delegate that authority to another municipal official or agency, and that West Hartford has chosen to delegate site plan approval to the town planner's office. Under ordinary circumstances, Madam Chair, this delegation, I think, is entirely appropriate. Site plan review typically involves projects that already comply with zoning and district standards, leaving really only technical and administrative determinations to be made by the town planner. The complication, though, arises in the context of 830G. The Supreme Court has held that affordable housing development applicants may use site plan process even when their proposals do not comply with the underlying zoning or exceed applicable standards. Those decisions postdate the town's delegation ordinance, and in our view, were not contemplated when that delegation was adopted. To our knowledge, Madam Chair, West Hartford has not previously faced this specific scenario. The only other 830G site plan that was approved using the site plan approval process. Camelot was actually located in a zone where the use was permitted, meaning that the review was truly more administrative in nature. That's not the case here, though. Under Section 830G, applications may proceed, or rather, the Supreme Court has ruled that under Section 830G, applications may proceed in districts where the use is not permitted and may exceed zoning standards unless the town can demonstrate that legitimate public interests outweigh the need for affordable housing. We believe that evaluating those competing interests and applying the statutory balancing test is not a purely administrative function and is more fundamentally a legislative judgment. And for that reason, we believe that for this type of project, it is not appropriate for those types of determinations to be delegated to a single administrative official. The town council is the elected legislative body, and zoning authority is really the proper forum to conduct that analysis and to weigh the community impacts, public health and safety concerns, and to weigh those and balance them against the need for affordable housing and make the requisite findings on the record. Accordingly, this ordinance proposes that for 830G applications that do not comply with zoning or exceed standards, site plan approval will remain with the town council. I want to emphasize, though, that this ordinance is prospective only. The vessel application would be grandfathered under the existing ordinance, meaning that the town planner would continue to be responsible for reviewing that application, which he is currently doing and has referred it to appropriate town departments prior to rendering his decision. I would also note that the current ordinance does not provide for a public hearing in connection with the site plan approval. Given the significant interest in the vessel project, Madam Chair, residents who wish to comment either in support or opposition should submit written comments to the town clerk, who will then transmit them to the town planner for inclusion in the administrative record. The statutory deadline for a decision is January 20th, although a decision may be issued earlier, and so comments should be submitted promptly. By contrast, Madam Chair, that's one issue that the ordinance that we are proposing addresses. For future 830G proposals that are required to go to the council for site plan approval, the proposed ordinance would require a public hearing, and it would also mandate referral to the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for a recommendation and permit the council to make a discretionary referral to DRAC. We believe that this would ensure transparency, public participation, and a more robust record. Madam Chair, as I said at the beginning, I prepared a privileged legal memorandum advising the council on these issues and others. And given the sensitivity of this matter, I would recommend that the committee enter executive session to discuss the memorandum. If there's other issues that the committee wishes to discuss after that executive session, we can return to a public session.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. So, without objection, we are going to move into executive session pursuant to Section 1-206E to discuss a communication privilege by the attorney-client relationship, to wit, Memorandum from Corporation Counsel concerning applicability of site plan approval to an application for an affordable housing development. Without objection, we will see you all over in executive session in just a few moments. Okay, we are back into our regular meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. And just to finish up this item 2B, this is the ordinance concerning site plan approval of affordable housing developments. Our next step is members of this committee have agreed to move this forward, and we will see this on the agenda for town council at next week's meeting. So thank you for the discussion. And we will move on to business item 2C, approval of the minutes for the meeting from December 8th. To approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Winograd, and a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval, committee members, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or nays? Okay, so minutes are approved, and we are going to move on to item 2D, resolution appropriating a federal grant to support a vulnerable user safety program. And I will turn it over to our town manager, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this resolution has been a long time coming. We've been talking a lot about this one over the last several months. So we applied for our second Safe Streets for All grant back in the spring of 24. We were notified of the award in the fall of 24, and we've been working with the Federal Highway Administration since then to have an agreement that both parties have now signed on. So we've signed off on it, as well as the Federal Highway Administration. So the award is for a total of $3,972,625. And the town share of that is $794,525, leaving the federal share of $3,178,000. So the duration of the grant is for 60 months. And will include a number of projects that have all previously been identified in our Vision Zero action plan, which we had submitted with our formal application process. So it will include a red light enforcement plan, and that will involve a process that we just went through with our speed enforcement camera program. So it'll be a very similar process that we will begin really over the next couple of weeks. It will involve quick build projects that we've seen over the last construction season. So we will continue those quick build projects as we move into the next year and the year after, with curb extensions, pedestrian islands, median islands, et cetera. Improvement along 9 different corridors, creating pedestrian safety zones, both in the center, Park Road, New Britain Avenue, as well as formally identifying school safety zones as part of this process as well. Also will include 4 road safety audits. So we will actually have our Vision Zero annual report ready for the February CPED meeting. And I think at that point, we are going to identify projects that we will be working on for the upcoming year, so we can get into some of the details of how this grant fits into those projects at that meeting as well. But for us formally accepting the monies from Federal Highway Administration, this grant will allow that to happen, and we would put this on the agenda for our next council meeting on January 13th. So through you, Madam Chair, I will pause there and turn it over to you guys for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Town Manager. So just a high-level summary. This is a federal grant that we're getting to help us with some projects that we were planning to do anyway, and this will help offset that, and also to implement a red light camera program, which I know many of us are enthusiastic about anything that we can do to prevent people from running red lights in town. So open to committee members for questions. None. And okay, so we will move forward on, yes, Councillor Wang, we'll have time for one question.
I thank you through you, Madam Chair. So Town Manager Ledwith, so just so I understand this correctly, the program is called the Red Light Running Program, but actually it includes not just red light enforcement, but the other items listed in there. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. Through you, Madam Chair, to Councilor Wang. So the red light camera program is a portion of the grant. But honestly, that's probably the meatier topic of the grant. But we have about $2.5 million in construction included in this grant. And that's for all the quick builds that we've already been working on that will continue to transform throughout the community, raise crosswalks, speed humps, speed tables at intersections, things of that nature. So the red light camera is the one that I think people recognize a lot more, but it entails a lot more.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions on this one? Great, excellent. So we will move that forward to Town Council for next week and move on to item 2E, resolution amending the general fund budget for fiscal year 24-25. And back over to you, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you. So this resolution is an annual financial housekeeping item. And you'll recall last month, the council adopted a resolution where we appropriated the fiscal year 25 surplus. So we do that every year, right around this time as well. And then in the following meeting, we'll have another resolution that amends the fiscal year 25 general fund budget for expenses that exceeded the adopted budget, which we identified back in December, but just it's identified here in the resolution as well. So our expenses exceeded the adopted budget by $1.9 million, which was primarily attributed to police and fire overtime. So these, and this happens every single year. It's, roughly the same number in terms of the overtime numbers coming in higher than what we budget, but they're offset by higher than anticipated investment earnings. We had, as we discussed previously as well, a higher tax collection rate, and then our building permit and fire plan review permit fees exceeded our budgeted numbers as well. So, so this will amend the budget to acknowledge the increase in expenditures and overtime for both police and fire. And through you, Madam Chair, I will pause there and happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Great, thank you. Questions from committee members first? Mr. Winograd or Mr. Lyons? Okay, and Councilor Harris?
Hi, thank you. I had a question on this, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Ledwith. I noted that obviously what you said, that the vast majority of the expenditure here is for overtime in both the police and the fire department, and that those numbers are actually, pretty big.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, and if you say that that's something that sort of happens every year, is there a place that we would be, instead of paying overtime, be hiring more police officers and fire personnel? Because I mean, we may actually save money if we were doing that, but I don't know if that's appropriate for this committee or for security. But I'm just curious, why we wouldn't be hiring more people instead of paying that amount of money in overtime and then having to amend our budget.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, it's a good question, Councilor Harris. A couple of factors here. So one, going into the budgeting process, we will make some changes as we're adopting our budget each year. And those are two areas that we will, usually in order to lower our number, we will lower overtime numbers. And knowing that, we will utilize surplus in the event that they come in, and they generally do come in where we expect them to. But that will help us through the budgeting process every year. And, we take a look at staffing with the kind of the additional cost of hiring additional police officers and firefighters are the benefit fees, the benefit costs. So adding for each new police officer, you're adding a new pension and a new retiree healthcare obligation as well for firefighters. So not that we won't continue to look at the possibility of doing that in the future. In fact, we're on the receiving end of a grant that we're flushing through right now that will allow us to do that. But that's where we'll try to offset our costs and our taxpayers and residents' costs by utilizing grants as much as possible. So we feel we're adequately staffed. But if we had more officers or more firefighters, would our overtime numbers go down? But we'd have other expenses, long-term liability expenses that would increase as well. So it's a balance. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I just think it's worth looking at that because I think it's always better to have more people on staff than be always paying overtime. But thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Councilor Harris, as Mr. Ledwith mentioned, as we enter the budget season, we'll have plenty of opportunity to bring forward ideas like that and figure out what the fiscal impact is on both sides of the equation. So we'll have you'll see, we'll have a lot of meetings where we talk about things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on this particular resolution? If not, I think we're ready to move this one forward to Town Council for next week as well. And then we will move to item 2F, a resolution authorizing the town manager to seek additional funding in the Brownfield Municipal Grant Program for unanticipated environmental remediation at 579 New Park Avenue. Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you. So you may recall that in June, the town received a $688,000 Brownfield grant to assist with the environmental remediation at 579 New Park Avenue, a project that's called, we refer to it now as the Jaden. So it's a multifamily development, has approximately 70 units, 20% of which will be deed restricted for affordable housing. Since closing the grant, the developer has completed abatement and remediation of the existing structure. So if you've driven down New Park Avenue, you may have noticed the work that's been happening there. And while the developer was going to remove the footings, they discovered an additional amount of contaminated soil that they were not aware of originally. So it wasn't included in our original application for the Brownfield grant. So they are going to be required to remediate about 1,000 to 1,500 additional tons of soil at an additional cost of about $290,000. So this resolution will allow us to request this amount from by the Department of Economic and Community Development. So if they were to approve it, it would bring the total grant award from 688 up to $978,000. So this is the first time we've actually gone back and requested an additional amount. So, but again, the resolution will allow us to apply for that additional amount, but we may or may not be receiving that additional amount to pass on to the developer. So I will pause there through you, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And before we open up to others, to clarify, the Brownfield Remediation Grant is one that municipalities can apply for, but developers cannot apply for to the state. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. So we apply for the grant and we receive the grant directly from the state and we pass it on to the developer.
Thank you. And I do want to start with committee members first. Mr. Winograd or Mr. Lyons, any questions?
I have one quick one, Madam Chair. Through you, Mr. Town Manager, if this is turned down, is this development at risk? Is there any risk if it's not approved?
I don't believe so. We're hoping to that they'll still be able to continue to move forward. So, but it certainly was quite a number, the additional tonnage that they needed to remediate. So we're hopeful. We put together a good application. We're hopeful that DECD will recognize that.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Walters.
Hi, thank you. Rick, I was just wondering, do you have an idea of timing of this, how quickly it would go through? And
through you, Madam Chair, to Councilor Walters. So we'll, assuming the council will adopt the resolution on the 13th, we will apply on the 14th. We've already sent them pre-application information, so they're aware of everything, and we're hopeful to see a pretty quick turnaround.
okay, and I can't imagine that this would be a retroactive thing where they could go ahead and start the work and then get the money retroactively. I can't imagine that would be the case.
In this case, that might be okay because of all the work that's already taken place. We've already been the developer's been remediating. So, but I can get that answer for you by the council meeting on the 13th.
I was just curious because I would hate to see the work slow down. I mean, weather permitting anyways. So,
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on this one? All right, thank you. This is an excellent use of state funds if we can get them. So thank you to your team for thinking of moving forward on that. And finally, item 2G, a resolution amending the salary range of non-union director positions. And back over to you, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you. So this, we do amend the salary range for directors, for non-union directors. So that's our leadership team, my leadership team. That's our police chief, fire chief, Department of Public, Director of Public Works, leisure and social services, finance, community development, so on and so forth. So, so we would request the ability to amend the resolution, increase the high end of the range by an additional 5%. So it would go from $180,000 to $189,000. Last time we adjusted this range was back in July 1st of 2023. But increase in this range, we don't have many that are close to this range. Most are fall well below, but I do have one individual, high performing director who's right there, and this would give me the ability to be able to at least slightly bypass that current maximum of 180,000. Again, I don't see us needing to come back before the council for at least another couple of years after doing this, but it would allow us to honor the work of one individual who's right there presently. So, through you, Madam Chair, happy to answer any questions that the council had.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, thank you. That one's pretty easy too. Okay, we made it through the business items and we'll move on to item number 3, communications. Are there any communications?
Nothing this evening. I know we've taken up a lot of your time, so appreciate everyone's
and we have taken up a lot of yours.
So
do you have any staff reports?
Nothing this evening.
Tapped out on staff reports. Future agenda items. I know, Mr. Manager, you and I had spoken about receiving a financial report next month at next month's meeting.
Yep.
And then moving forward as well. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Excuse me. I apologize for that. And without further ado, if there is no objection, we will go ahead and adjourn at 8:04 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us for a long and productive meeting. Have a great night.